Hi, I'm Maurice Strauss. In this video, I'm going to be talking about using custom states to organize, clarify, and simplify complex conditional logic in Bubble. Custom states, if you don't know about them, they are basically variables that attach to design elements such as the page, a text box, a button, a group, or any other design element you could put on a page in Bubble. And the basic idea here, it's not too complicated. It is that you can create a bunch of custom states of the boolean type, that is, of the yes/no type, and have the conditional have them be yes when some condition is met, and have them have the value of no when the condition is not met. And then when it comes time to initiate a workflow by pressing a submit button or whatever else triggers the workflow, to just have these simple custom states as the yes/no building blocks for the workflows, as opposed to the more complicated element-driven logic of Bubble. So there's three organizing principles that I use to make this simple and make it happen cleanly. One of them is to make custom states properties of the page. It doesn't have to be this way. You can make the custom elements attach as properties of anything. I think for clarity and organization, it helps to just make these custom states features of the page. And conversely, if I'm using other custom states, maybe ones that are not about the conditionals for the workflow, but might be when I need to take an input and manipulate it or something like that, I'll attach it to the input field or a submit button or something else, just to keep the page, reserve the page for just the custom states that have to do with conditional logic. The second principle is I want to assign values to custom states not when the submit button is pressed or whatever else the trigger is for the workflow to actually start. I want it to be determined at the time of the input. So I use the when the input changes as the when condition. And the main reason for that is if you assign this custom states values inside the same workflow as when you actually want to start using the conditional logic, you can end up with an order of operations problem where you first execute the conditionals and only afterwards assign the values to the conditionals. So by placing the job on the input, that is when you assign the values to the custom states at the time that the input changes, you're forcing it into the correct order of operations. And the third organizing principle, and this is really logic, but it helps me to think about it as an organizing principle. When the input changes, you want to define both the yes condition and the no condition in the same workflow, which I might forget to do if I don't have it in front of me as a design principle. So of course, if what you're looking to make sure it happens before the workflow starts is that a checkbox is checked, then you want it to be the situation that when the checkbox is unchecked, the workflow does not go through. So you have to define the conditions for the yes and the conditions for the no. So let's look at an example. This app requires you to upload a file, and in order to do it, you need to set the slider to over 70, check 3 boxes, and upload a file that is either a PDF or a JPEG. So you've got 3 conditions, with one of them really has sub-conditions because it's because of the 3 checkboxes. So as you can see, if you get all 3 of these conditions fine, you get a success message, and that's a stand-in for a successful for the workflow. If you slide the slider under 70, you get a fail. If you uncheck a checkbox, you get a fail. And then if you go and correct those, you have a success message. And if you upload something that's not a PDF or a JPEG, then you try to upload, you get this failure alert. And then if you change it back to a PDF, you get a success. So we're going to reconstruct this build from scratch using custom states. So we'll create a new page. We're going to call it tutorial, and we're going to build it. So as I mentioned, I like the custom states to be a feature of the page. So basically when the page is loaded, we want to define 3 states. One for the slider, one for the checkboxes, and one for the file uploader. I like to put these in the form of a yes-no question so I can really quickly see what I'm dealing with when I have to choose the custom state in the workflow. So is confidence level high? And the slider is just a stand-in for confidence level. I want over 70% confidence level in order to proceed. The second state are all the checkboxes checked. And as you'll see, this is a yes-no, as all of them are, and then define, we give them all no values by default. And then we're going to define another state, is the file in an appropriate format. And the state type will be yes, no, and we create it and give it a default no value. So having done that, we'll build the slider, which is an input type. We'll set the values from 0 to 100 as the value range. And of course, when it comes to Bubble, sliders don't have the number display built in, so you could slide it back and forth, but there's no number display. So I always, since I like the number display, create a text box, and then I use the dynamic data feature to just display the number as you slide it up and down. And I like the small title style a lot better than the plain text style. So we go to preview just to make sure that the number feature works. And there it is, you can see the numbers displayed. So the next step is to build the 3 checkboxes. And it doesn't really matter what we call them for this example. So do you have permission to upload would be one. Copy and paste, and we can make the next box about the terms of service. Copy paste. And this could be about I have not altered the document, and now I realize that I should have phrased all of these not as questions but as statements, so I'll change the other 2. Get rid of the question mark. So that's the 3 checkboxes. And as our next step, we want a file uploader, which is the other input form in Bubble. Once we have those, we want a submit button. Or an upload button. And I really don't like the default style of button either, so I always change it to outline button. So this will be upload, and then we want two alerts, one that says success and the other that says failure. Alerts in Bubble are by default invisible, and you just change one, copy and paste, change the style to the warning style of alert for failure, just because the red looks more like a failure. So with all of that, we can start designing the workflow. And like I said, we want you to operate on the inputs. The custom states should update based on input. So based on the slider's input, we go down to element actions and set state to change the custom state. We go to the page and we go to the custom state about the slider, which is about confidence level, and we'll define the yes condition, and then we will define the no condition. So the restrictions on the yes condition is that the slider's value is going to be greater than or equal to 70. And the no condition here is very simple. You set the state of the custom state to no only when the value of the slider is less than 70. And I'm not going to go and preview. If I was actually building this, I would go and preview it after every operation to make sure things are working correctly. Won't do that here. So we're going to do the checkboxes. So we're applying this when the input changes on the first checkbox. We're defining the yes condition of the custom state about checkboxes for when we want all three checkboxes to be checked, right? This is how we are simplifying the conditional. So when the first checkbox is checked and the second checkbox is checked and the third checkbox is checked. And the no condition, of course you may know De Morgan's law, you want it to be set to no only when the first checkbox is not checked, or, you want to use or and not and, the second checkbox is not checked, or when the third checkbox is not checked, because of course you want all three to be checked in order for the yes condition to apply. As soon as one gets unchecked, you want the condition to be no so that the workflow cannot proceed. We're going to copy and paste this. The reason being, this only changes the custom state when the first checkbox is checked or unchecked, but there's two other checkboxes and we want the custom state to update when their values are changed as well. So we're simply copying and pasting the workflow. The then condition is the same. We just want the when condition to update to reflect all three checkboxes inputs changing. And finally, the file uploader, when its value changes, we want the custom state about the appropriate format to change. And the way we do that is you take the file, well, we'll see. You set it to yes when this file uploader's values file name contains, and here you're going to input the strings .pdf and .jpeg, and there's two spellings for JPEG, right? There's JPG and JPEG. So if any one of those is contained, is a substring of the file name, then that indicates that the file is in the appropriate format. So we're going to put all three of those in there. And that'll define the yes condition. And the no condition will be met. The page's custom states no condition will be met when the file uploader's values file name does not contain .pdf and does not contain JPEG in the first spelling and does not contain JPEG in the second spelling. And again, in this case, we're flipping ors to ands, so we want any one of these strings matching should allow the workflow to proceed. It would have to be that none of them are a match in order for the workflow to stop because the file format is incorrect. So we've basically handled all of the logic for the custom states, and then we want to proceed to the actual workflow. So when the upload button is clicked, we want to show the message. So we'll do the success message first, only when all three conditions are met, meaning when all three custom states attached to the page have the value of yes. And we want the failure message to display. Should not be set state. We should be going to the alert show message. And we want the failure message to display when any one of these states is in the no state. And that should be all the logic that we need. So let's go to preview and test it. So we want to slide this to over 70 or 70 and above. We want to check all three boxes, and we want to upload a PDF or a JPEG. I happen to have some PDFs handy. Once it's up, the file is ready, we upload and we get a success message. If we slide the slider below 70, we get a failure, and if we slide it back above 70, we get a success. So we're good on the slider. If we uncheck a single box, we get a failure. If we recheck it, we get a success. So the checkbox logic is working. What if we change the file uploader to a value other than PDF and then upload? It's a failure. And if we change it back to a PDF, success. So it all works.